Well, hello and welcome once again to another edition of Weird News and Wacky History, a look behind the scenes of what's been happening through the years. I'm your host, Pastor Roland Moss, the old history dude, author, historian, and speaker, with a look today at Let's Go Pranking. Sports teams know that winning is as much in the head as it is on the field. Psych out the other team and you're already halfway to victory. Just ask Auburn. The year was 1896 and the Auburn Tigers were set to play the Rumble and Wreck from Georgia Tech for the very first time. The Tech team was scheduled to arrive on a red-eye due in early on game day. But in the wee hours before their arrival, the Tigers were already hard at work, liberally slathering over 1/4 mile of track with pig grease, lard, and lots of soap. Then they scurried into the shadows to watch their handiwork. The engineer braked hard coming into the railroad station, but nothing happened. With brakes locked up, the locomotive and its string of cars slid right on past the station and then halfway to Loachapoka, 5 miles away. With no rides available, the Georgia Yellow Jackets had to schlep all their gear back to Auburn, only to lose decisively the next day, 45-0. So did second-year Auburn coach John Heisman have anything to do with it? No one can say for sure, but legend has it that he enjoyed a mighty fine view while sipping lemonade on the roof of the newly opened Toomer's drugstore. And when it comes to pranks, nobody outdoes Caltech. California Institute of Technology is known for its wacky stunts that they pulled through the years. It is especially played out in the rivalry between West Coast Caltech and East Coast MIT. In April of 2005, a group of Caltech students handed out free t-shirts at a fair for prospective MIT students. Packaged so that MIT clearly showed through the plastic bag, the back really read, "Because not everyone can go to Caltech." Caltech undergrads also hacked the scoreboard in the 1984 Rose Bowl game. Instead of displaying scores for UCLA and Illinois, it read Caltech 38, MIT 9. So impressed was the scoreboard manufacturer that the pranksters received job offers. Caltech is never shy about tooting their own horns. Residents of Tinseltown awoke on the 100th anniversary of the founding of their town in 1987 to find that the iconic sign in the hills now read Caltech instead of Hollywood. But the masterpiece still remains the 1961 Rose Bowl game. The Washington Husky cheerleaders created a complex flip card display where their fans held up a series of colored cards to create words and designs. Caltech pranksters, calling themselves the Fiendish 14, replaced the master instructions with their own. 15 patterns were created, but number 14 made history. Spelled out in stadium-sized words were Caltech. Nobody pranks the champions of Caltech. But pranks aren't just limited to the U.S. Higher education can be wildly frustrating at times. Professors randomly assign huge amounts of reading and massive term papers or other academic insanity on a moment's notice. I personally talked one friend out of quitting grad school over ridiculous demands of one unreasonable professor. But the students of Uppsala University in Sweden have a unique method of dealing with the pressure. They open their windows every night at 10 o'clock p.m. and scream. A quirky school tradition, this peculiar practice dates as far back as the 1970s. Locals call it the Flogs to Scream, named for the Uppsala neighborhood where it occurs. And it seems to be spreading. The Lapskarsberget community near Stockholm University has its own screaming event, called the Lapkar Cry, while students at the University of Lund call their ritual howling the Delphi Roar or the Elvaldrollet, the 11 o'clock roar, since folks there prefer doing it an hour later. After about 2 minutes of screaming, howling, and even blowing plastic horns, windows close and academic life returns to its normal grind. Occasionally, when the weather is bad or everyone's too tired, they just skip a week. But please note this is only for students in certain locations. Random screaming in Sweden will get you arrested. And last but not least, pranks have a long, long history. Theodore Hook bet Samuel Beasley that he could make any address in London the most talked about house in town. This was too good to pass up, so Beasley took the bet, choosing 54 Berners Street, the home of a Mrs. Tottenham. Hook posted thousands of letters requesting services of all kinds. On November 27, 1809, 12 chimney sweeps arrived to clean the flues. Next came a massive delivery of coal, followed closely by a contingent of bakers bearing wedding cakes. Soon appeared a small army of lawyers, doctors, apothecaries, and ministers supposedly summoned by a dying patient. Butchers, fishmongers came with baskets of fish, undertakers with coffins, hat makers, shoemakers, 12 pianos, and 6 men with an organ, the Lord Mayor, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the Governor of the Bank of England, plus an army of servants, all seeking work, showing up at 54 Berners Street. All available police were summoned to restore order. Meanwhile, Hook and Beasley watched surreptitiously from a house across the street. Officials offered a reward for the apprehension of the perpetrator of the Berners Street hoax, but Hook wisely got out of town. He'd won his bet, spending thousands in exchange for a guinea, about $102 in modern currency. And that's about all the time we have for this edition of Weird News and Wacky History, a look behind the scenes of what's been happening through the years. I'm your host, Pastor Roland Moss, that old history guy, author, historian, and speaker, wishing that all your history may be just a bit weird.